here around together as best we can. I need to grab my jacket. You don't need to grab your stuff.
I wasn't coming over.
Yes, here around together as best we can. I need to grab my jacket. Eisenbaum family. Can you call everyone to the other? We're gonna create kind of a circle here right around Jackie. So come close. And come close. We might otherwise be doing this a little later and in the private space, but we want to make sure we can include Jackie here. So we're going to do it here and now. So for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Rabbi Katie, and we're going to begin with a ritual called Kriyah, which means tearing. And the idea is that we're symbolizing in a physical way the tearing to the fabric of life that happens when we lose someone we love. And so traditionally, this is a ritual that can happen from the moment you hear somebody dies. You might even have seen a story in the Bible about this, where a person rends their garments when they hear about the loss. We're going to do this in a symbolic way with ribbons. And it's not a have to, it's a if you want to. And let me just explain before we pass them around. Ordinarily, this ritual would be for anyone who is a spouse, a child, a sibling, or a parent of the deceased. If you want to participate and you're not in one of those categories, you can. So grandchildren, if you want to, you can. You don't have to. For most mourners, this goes over the right side. But if you are the child of Sidney, then put it on your left side over your heart. And what I'll do is I'll give these out, you'll pin them. They have a little bit of a tear started down at the bottom of the ribbon. And I'll lead you through a few words. We'll physically tear that tear a little further. And you would wear this through the period of Shiva. So I'm going to just sort of let you take and yes. So when you get your ribbon, you can just put it on the right side, or if you're son or daughter, put it on the left side. And I'll take you through a little bit of words and you can just put that on the wrong side. I don't care. Does anybody else want one? So does everybody see where there's a little tear started at the bottom? Okay. All right, so take a moment. Michael's first time using a pen. Is everybody ready? Yeah? Okay. Let's just take a moment before we move into this to just, even all of us, put a hand on your heart, close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths together. Just arrive in this moment and take a moment to think about Sidney. Take a moment to think about one another. Just opening your heart to feel the love that's flowing through this family, through this room. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. I'm going to say some words in Hebrew and then English. You can repeat after me if you'd like to. You don't have to. Baruch atah Adonai. Baruch atah Adonai. Eloheinu melech haolam. Dayan ha'emet. Praised are you, Adonai, our God. Sovereign of the universe. Judge of truth. Okay, now you can take that ribbon and just tear it a little bit further. Okay. And this next line comes right from the book of Job. Adonai Natan. But Adonai Lachas. Yihi Shem. Adonai Neborah. Adonai has given. And Adonai has taken. Praise be the name of Allah. So, it's hard to feel praise at this moment. It's very hard. And these words, and there are words later that are words of praise that will come across when we get to the prayer called the Kaddish. I think of them as kind of a pointer that even in these moments where it might not be intuitive to be finding reasons to praise, even in those moments, we can aspire to get there. That we hope that in celebrating and remembering the life of someone who touched so many, that we can find reason to give thanks and praise for that. So we have a few more minutes before the service will begin. I'd like to invite your family back into the room here, or you can hang here and visit as you like. We'll review one more time just for a moment before we come out to begin the service, but there's water, there's restrooms. And yes, I need to assign a couple of readers for a couple of poems, so we'll do that back in. I can do better. That'd be great. I have to go. Are you okay? Okay. I think you all come for your baby. Hello. Well, let's assign you one, Ethan. I think that's what Pam had in mind. Let's go in there and see which one that she had. But that, I think it would be better. In Michigan, much less library. My mom.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, like good. Yeah, I think we're ready. Yeah. Well, like, so, go ahead. Love your tie, by the way. I know. Oh, yeah. I just had, well, she said the term. No, every time I see her, I try to hear that. We've always talked about China. Right, yeah. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
My back hurts, but it's right now. I don't. It's not something. If you can please ensure your cell phones are on silent. Thank you.
We have this family that's super.
Yeah, my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, la 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 yeah, la la yeah, la la yeah, la la yeah, la la la. You can join us if you know the melody. La la yeah, la yeah, la la yeah, la yeah, la la yeah, la 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 yeah, la Yeah, la, la, yeah, 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 yeah, la, yeah, la, yeah. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying, a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here as we remember the life of Sidney Eisenbaum. As we'll soon hear, he was a person with a formidable intellect who used his mind and skills as a doctor and in military service to save and improve many lives. And while his professional life accomplishments were impressive and substantial, he was also a son, a brother, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and even a great-grandfather. In these relationships, he had profound impact and shaped lives in a much more personal way. And we're here to remember his life and also to comfort those close loved ones who grieve his loss most dearly. With us today in person and from afar, Alan, Sharon, and Jackie. You all remember Sidney from decades when he was young. Becky, you were blessed to share his sunset years and you cared for him loyally till the end. And you, his children, Pam and Michael, Gerald and Andrea, all mourn the loss of a father who has been part of your lives since the day you were born. Mark and Lorma, he has been present in your lives as the father of your spouse and grandfather to your children. And in his 86 years, Sidney had the joy of not just grandchildren, but also a great-grandchild. Ethan and Lindsay, Matthew, Nina, David and Ryan, Quinn and Kathleen, Kalani. As you hear more about your grandfather, your great-grandfather, I hope that you'll feel proud to be part of his legacy and inspired to carry forward the best of who Sidney Eisenbaum was in your own way, in your own generations. I'd like now to call up Ethan, one of Sidney's grandsons, to read a poem for us.
Hello. We turn our thoughts to yesterday, to a world that lives only in our memory. As we recall the days gone by, we know that the past is irretrievable. Yet, the gift of memory, we recapture treasured moments and images. We are thankful for the happiness we knew with those no longer here, with whom we lived and laughed and loved. We praise the eternal wellspring of life who links yesterday to tomorrow. We affirm that despite all the tragedy bound up with living, it is still good to be alive. We understand that there can be no love without loss, no joy without sorrow. May we have the courage to accept the all of life, the love and the loss, the joy and the sorrow as we remember them.
I'd now like to call up Mark, Sidney's son-in-law, to say some words about his life.
Sidney Eisenbaum was born in 1937 in the Bronx in New York, to Morris and Jenny Eisenbaum, immigrants from Poland. His first language was Yiddish. Sid did not learn English until he attended public school, having spent a few years studying at a yeshiva, an Orthodox Jewish school for children. Sid did not really like being at yeshiva, but his mother recognized his intelligence and thought that was a good place for him. A graduate of Long Beach High School in 1954, he attended Tulane University in New Orleans before marrying Jacqueline Cantor in 1958 and starting his medical studies at George Washington Medical School in Washington, D.C. Their first child, Pamela, arrived during this time. While doing his internship at Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, Sid was drafted into the Army, which led to a posting at Fort Dix, New Jersey. It was here that Michael joined the growing family. The family moved to San Francisco, where Sid worked in general surgery at Letterman Hospital, and another son, Gerald, became a member of the family. After serving in a MASH unit in Korea during the Vietnam War, where Sid was unit commander, something I just recently learned, and strikes me a bit like having Hawkeye Pierce in the MASH series run the unit. The family returned to Washington, D.C., so Sid could begin his plastic surgery residency. His service in Korea helped him realize the importance of reconstructive surgery, something that combined his skills, speed, and efficiency as a surgeon with his artistic sensibilities. It was here the family grew yet again with Andrea's arrival. The family moved to Denver in 1972. Sid transitioned from active military service to the reserves and also started in private practice in Aurora. This allowed him to pursue other interests, skiing and volunteering in the ski patrol, and getting the entire family involved in skiing, lining them up and buckling their boots one after the other. I would have loved to see somebody fall over and the whole line go. He earned his license as a private pilot, and he did a number of other things that were of interest to him. Several years later, after Sid and Jackie's marriage ended, he married Becky Klein, who was a devoted spouse and partner to Sid, especially as Alzheimer's laid claim on him. This was an especially cruel fate, a twist of fate for a man with a near photographic memory, someone able to recall medical school notes, decades later, as we'll hear about in a bit. Sid is survived by his wife, Becky, who lives in Lincoln, Nebraska, and is with us today via live stream. His brothers, Al and Alan Eisenbaum, his former wife, Jackie Eisenbaum, his children, Pamela, Michael, Gerald, and Andrea, and their partners, children, and grandchildren. May his memory be for a blessing.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like now to call up Alan, Sidney's brother.
Welcome, everybody. My eulogy for Sidney Leon Eisenbaum. I'm Alan, the youngest brother in the family in which Sid grew up. My parents had 5 sons Sid was the third child of my parents. First came Harold, the oldest. He was born in 1927. Next came Leonard in 1932. He died from measles in 1933. Next came Sid in 1937. After him came Al in 1941, and finally me in 1947. Interestingly, today's Nisan 12 in the Hebrew calendar, which is the day of Sid's burial. It's also our brother Hal's yahrzeit. Also of interest is that Sid and Al share the same birthday on March 11th. Sid's intelligence and intellect were considered to be a very big deal in our family. My parents and brothers considered Sid to be the smartest one in the family, and more than that, a child prodigy. This was acknowledged tacitly and an accepted fact in the family. Sid read the encyclopedia. My father subtly cut him slack in his behavior. Even as a kid, I considered my father's psychology and parenting Sid very smart, especially considering Pop's lack of a formal education or examples to model. Meanwhile, my mother cooked his favorite meal, lamb chops. He skipped 1 year of elementary school. The report cards that he brought home rarely showed anything lower than an A. He maintained this level of achievement throughout school, including college and medical school. Sid's artistic ability was considerable. The drawings he made were impressive. I'm not sure how old he was when he drew his pencil drawings, but I think before college. Even to this day, I don't think anyone has thrown out any one of his sketches. Those drawings that he made make you think of Da Vinci and Dürer. His medical school notes reflect the same meticulous craftsmanship. I'm sure Sid could have been a professional medical illustrator if he tried. Sid wanted to be a doctor since age 7, I was told. He was trained in plastic surgery, as you have heard. To say his artistic talent complemented his profession is almost an understatement. He was very talented as a surgeon and enjoyed private practice. To encounter Sid was to come into contact with his sense of humor. He was intelligent and had a quick mind, producing a response while others were still reacting. One of my favorite singers referred to our mother's assisted living place named Pleasant Manor. Sid remarked, "Pleasant Manor, you have a pleasant manner." MANOR in its first usage and MANNER in the latter usage. Did Sid have an influence on me? Yes. My decisions to go into medicine and then ophthalmology, living and practice in Colorado, and join the Army Reserve are some of the examples. Our family was religious. Sid went to yeshiva, as you have heard. We have gone to shul together on high holidays. Sid, may you rest in eternal peace, and may your neshama be bound up with the living. Amen.
I'd like to call up Michael, one of Sidney's sons.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing that. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to try to share some of my fondest memories. It more deals with Dad's sense of humor. Let's hope it's still funny. For that, I go back to the beginning. My beginning, not Dad's. We lived in Mill Valley,
I don't know, was I 2, 3 years old, maybe? But one of my earliest memories that I still have is looking down off a balcony at some very long trees. I can't remember seeing the bottom. And I didn't know if that was a real memory or not. Because it's, I was 2 or 3. Fast forward many years later, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, Mom, you were even part of this conversation, I think, if that memory serves. And I asked about that memory to you and Dad. And I said, why do I have this memory of looking down? And the two of you essentially together knew why. And you told me. And you said, it's because I used to throw my toys off the balcony and just watch them fall into the oblivion and fog below. So then I knew it was real. Not too long ago, a few years back, before Dad moved to Nebraska, when I was visiting him while he was living near Aurora Reservoir. When I was growing up, Aurora Reservoir existed, but it was all cattails and mosquitoes. Me and my friends tried going there one time. That was a huge mistake. We almost got eaten by giant mosquitoes. Now it's a little resort community with houses, and Dad found it and moved in there. And while there and visiting, staying at Dad's house there, Dad and I decided to take a trip to Buckley Air Force Base, where he had base privileges. And we're driving up to the base, and was it maybe 10 years ago now? 8, 9, somewhere in there. And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's get on the base. Let's go look at the planes. So we do that. They let us on. They had to check with the commander or something like that, but they knew who he was. And so we go on base and we're driving around looking at stuff. And there's a couple of jet fighters kind of displayed around the base. And so we stop, get out, start taking pictures. I didn't climb on the plane or anything like that. So we're there, we're enjoying the time together, taking our photographs. And the next thing you know, a swarm of MPs rolls up. You haven't heard the story. I've never told it before. And they look at us and they're like, yeah, what are you? I mean, they're serious. And we're just like, what? Well, apparently we were taking pictures in the direction of those secret giant golf ball things, which are like military secrets or something. Apparently, I think it's like concealed radar satellite things or something like that, but they didn't like that. And apparently there's cameras all over the base and they saw us doing. So they roll up, and first they were a little militarily rude. But then when they realized we were just there innocently taking pictures, they wanted to confiscate the camera. It was in the days of the digital camera before the phones really became popular for taking pictures. So they wanted to confiscate the camera. Dad said, you don't need to confiscate the camera. We can just delete the pictures. So they watched as we deleted all the pictures one by one. And I think somehow Dad was able to sneak and save one of them with me and him basically taking a selfie in front of the F-16. And I'm sure I have it somewhere. I looked. There's so many photos. Another one of perhaps my most fond memory is Dad invited me, just me and him, to go see a movie. And it was 1974. You'll know it in a second. Not Jaws. Remember, this is humor. Jaws was so damn scary, I almost walked out. I think that was 73 too. So anyway, so dad says, let's go see a movie, and he tells me, what movie? It had just come out. I was 10 years old. Young Frankenstein. And I'm like, okay. So we're sitting there. And really the show hasn't even started yet. And dad's already starting to laugh in anticipation. Because he knows. Somehow he knows. And that was kind of dad's sense of humor, that kind of stuff. Maybe a half hour into the movie, and you'll know this, you'll remember this scene. There's a scene where, young Frankenstein, played by Peter Boyle, after he comes to life, is wandering through the woods or something like that, and comes across a little cottage with a blind man inside, played by Gene Hackman. And I could see, I could feel dad, the humor emanating from him. I don't know what's going on. I'm 10 years old. And so Peter Boyle goes into the house, and Gene Hackman hands him a bowl because he's going to serve him some soup. Now you know. So Peter Boyle's sitting there holding the bowl of soup. Bowl, not yet soup. And Gene Hackman reaches the ladle into the pot. And remember, he's blind. So he gets the hot soup and he moves it towards the bowl by sound. But he's shaking, he's waffling, and dad's just dying. I mean, he's absolutely dying. He's I think he might be on his knees. And I'm just going, I don't know. Okay, yeah, I guess it's funny. But as Gene Hackman puts the bowl of soup and Peter Boyle is trying to follow the ladle, so he gets the soup in the bowl. Gene Hackman does a quick one inside, dumps the soup in Peter Boyle's lap. He yells screaming and runs out of the house. And I look over and dad's on the floor in the aisle, just laughing his head off. Just unbelievably. It was so fun. And for the next remaining hour or so of the movie, he never stopped laughing. He made it back into his chair. From that moment on, I've carried that with me. Whenever I think about it, whenever I think about dad, I think about that moment. A 10-year-old kid with his father. I didn't enjoy it to the level of the way he did. I enjoy it more now. And I've never told that story before. And I'm happy to share it with everybody, particularly you, Pam, Cheryl, Andre, and Mom.
We've all seen that movie now, like 20
Thank you. I tried to get David to watch it. I don't even know if he watched the whole thing. I think Dad remembers that too. Hard to forget. So I really just wanted y'all to know that about him. He loved to laugh. And his sense of humor lives on in me. My friends tell me every so often I get a good one out. I wish I could remember some of them, but they just happen. It was observational humor. As Alan pointed out earlier, he just had that knack to be able to see things in a very humorous light. And I want to thank you for listening. And thanks again for being here. I know Dad appreciates it.
Thank you, Michael. I'd like to call up Pam, Sid's daughter.
This shouldn't take more than an hour or so, so relax. This is my backup plan in case I can't get through it. And thanks, Michael, you made this a little easier. I love my father deeply, but I admired him just as much. It seemed to us kids there was nothing he didn't know and no subject he couldn't master. It was like we kind of had an intellectual superhero for a father. And as a surgeon, he really did save lives, lots of them. As a child, I so wanted to make him proud of me. I think we all did. Like most kids, I often failed. Once in 5th or 6th grade, I came home with a bad grade on a math test. This is unacceptable, he said. His method for helping me to improve was to lock me in the basement where he'd placed a chalkboard on which he'd written a series of math problems. You can come up when you've completed all these correctly. It was rather dark down there, I might add. I was down there a long time. He finally released me because it was dinner time. It was then that my mother told me my father wasn't very good at math either. My father confessed it was true. He wasn't very good at math. Later, I learned what that meant in reality. He received 1 B in his entire college career, which he was valedictorian, Tulane University. 1 B in his entire college career, and it was in math. Since all his other grades were A's, in his mind, he was a complete failure in math. His memory, as we've heard, was prodigious and intimidating, and there's a lot of family lore. Lore about his study notes. He created meticulous notes and then made notes on his notes, which my Uncle Alan recently looked visually beautiful. And he collected these notes into notebooks with numbered pages. He then memorized them page by page. This freaked his classmates out, by the way, in preparing for exams. Many years after he graduated, my Uncle Al, who recently told me this story and who's watching, my Uncle Al found one of these notebooks and teasing my father, talking 20, 30 years later, teasing my father, he said, "Bet you can't recite them from memory now." My father said, "Pick a page." And my uncle experienced the same thing that freaked out my father's classmates years earlier. Dad proceeded to recite whatever was on that page with perfect recall. As a military family, we lived a lot of different places. Dad remembered every address, every phone number, every license plate. He was a human computer with a very large hard drive. Interestingly, Dad never bragged about having a prodigious memory, at least not to us kids. For him, memory wasn't knowledge. It was simply a skill he cultivated to acquire knowledge. The acquisition of information is nothing but the accumulation of data. He talked knowledgeably about so many things, but not to impress us. It's just that he loved to learn and he wanted to teach us stuff, often seemingly random stuff. And when he was teaching us stuff, like, for example, how far away the nearest galaxy was, why Napoleon lost at Waterloo, I could go on, he thought he was playing with us. Yes, playing with us. And learning meant, yes, of course, you had to know stuff. But knowing stuff was It was meant to engage your imagination and to prompt you to ask more questions. At least that's how I experienced it. And I thought it was fun. He never taught us any memorization tricks, which frankly would have been useful. But Dad didn't memorize stuff actually to perform parlor tricks. He memorized it to learn. Dad wanted you to know the what of things so you could ponder the why of everything. Curious. If you force me to describe my father using only one word, it's curious. He was curious. And for me personally, this was the most important thing he passed on to me. Because I wanted to emulate him, I followed his lead in many interests and hobbies throughout my childhood. Surgery was a little too advanced for me in grade school, but he read science fiction, so I read science fiction. He read history, so I read history. He taught us about the constellations, and I made an effort to memorize them. He liked forensic anthropology, so I read books by Lewis and Mary Leakey. And then I read the book that brought down their whole theory. In case you don't know, I can tell you about it later. Their whole theory and the complexity, then my father and I discussed the complexity of the evolutionary genealogy of Homo sapiens. Not kidding. I remember the conversation. He could draw, as we heard, with exquisite precision. So I learned to draw. He took karate, so I took karate, and I think many of my siblings do. He played tennis, so I did too. He skied, so I did too, though in that case, I didn't have a choice. Fortunately, I came to love skiing, and so did all my siblings, which we've learned. We shared some of those skiing memories as our fondest memories. As I grew up, however, I came to love many of the things he loved. The heady things in particular, genuinely loved them for myself, not because I was trying to be like him. True, I never stopped wanting him to be proud of me. But our relationship evolved into something more natural and mutual. We enjoyed talking about history, art, theology, astrophysics, anthropology. I could go on. We discussed things we thought were meaningful and prompted deep questions. At least we thought they were deep questions. For example, why did the Neanderthals die out? Would the universe ever stop expanding? He asked me once as a child what I thought could stop it, by the way. Was it possible to prove the existence of God? Why did God choose the Jewish people, and was that a blessing or a curse? What's up with the red heifer? And if you don't know that, ask the rabbi or come to Shiva. If you could have everything, where would you put it? That's a joke that my father liked. Why do we say Kaddish for 11 months and not a year? The rabbi recently answered this question the other day. I'm really sorry, Dad, that you weren't here to learn the answer. So we can ask the rabbi later. Dad grew up Orthodox, and so he really knew traditional Judaism, and I had no end of questions about it. Why do we do this, and why do we do that? And Dad supplied many answers. When he didn't know, he simply affirmed it as a good question. So it turned out the most important thing my dad and I had in common was curiosity itself. It was what connected me to him. It also made our family conversations lively and fun. From him, I learned that one could ask deep, ponderous questions about the meaning of the universe and at the same time never take them too seriously. In fact, as Michael demonstrated, after curiosity, humor comes a close second to the traits I most valued in my father. He was as funny as he was smart, as well as he could draw. And I know Young Frankenstein by heart. I dare say you can test me later. Ultimately, I had a very different life from my father's. I didn't grow up to be a surgeon. I became an academic. I have no interest in piloting small planes, which was terrifying when I was in the plane with him. But I've gotten to travel all over and have worked in some of the world's greatest libraries. While we both liked history, he really liked the history of war, and I like pretty much the history of everything else. But my curiosity and everything that accompanies curiosity, research and reading, an imagination I've cultivated, I think, skepticism coupled with an open mind, a tendency to ask questions where others don't see that one is called for, a desire to create things for myself and to have fun while doing all of this. These are the things I actually like about myself. These are the qualities that help me become an academic. These are the qualities that define my life. And I owe them all to my father. I don't know who I would be, who I would have been without him, but I wouldn't be me. Amen.
Thank you, Pam. I'd like to call up Sid's daughter, Andrea, to read a poem.
Am I allowed to?
You can.
Also say a
you
few
can
words.
absolutely.
I wasn't going to, but listening to my family, I thought I would give some personal accounts of things with Dad, and I'm going to start off with the skiing story and the lining up, because I think we missed a spot there. And that would be this: poles, right? Hat, right? You had to go through all of them, and I don't remember which one of you forgot your glove. What did he forget? Because I
Alzheimer's that he remembered.
Yeah. Brought down the whole day with Michael forgetting something, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be good.
It was gloves.
It was gloves, and we could.
Bought me a pair of gloves.
Surprised he didn't make you pay him back later. So just for principal purposes, but as for skiing, my dad did teach us all to ski. I was not a talented skier at all in the beginning. I became very good over time as my father pushed, just like pushing Pam in the basement with math. I think I was number 4. He was a little tired of pushing with academics. Not that he didn't do that to me either, but he had relaxed a little bit. Number 4. That's me. But there was times when he, no matter what, he would say, like, we're going down this particular slope. Is it hard? No. Are you sure, Dad? Because you've tricked me before. It's fine. You can handle it. It's no big deal. And then I would look down and I'd be like, that's it. And I'm taking off my beeping skis and we're walking back up. And I would just make a scene. And then there'd be people on the list that would be on both sides, right? Like, you got this, kid. Because I was like 10 and I'm going down like a double diamond. And then other people like, don't be so hard on your kid. And I was like, boy, truth is, I had to go down that one and a lot of other ones that I was very, very scared of. But he did push and push and push because he wanted his kids to be great. He just didn't want to settle for good. And the other ski story, I was alone skiing with Dad at Copper Mountain. You probably have heard this story, but while we're skiing, we see a man going very fast, hit a ski sign, smash his face in. He is knocked out. And Dad sprung into action, saved his life, most likely. Said to me, you need to get help and you need to ski fast, but don't fall. You can't crash. It's a bad time to crash. He needs help. So I did, and that man later sent Dad, I think you may remembered, a note, a thank you card for saving his life. And so I did get to witness him do some pretty amazing things. The reason that I chose this poem as opposed to the one that Ethan read was because I think Dad really did instill in us, you should really try to do the right thing. Now, he was far from perfect, as we know, but he did want his kids to do the right thing with integrity and make good choices. And so here is the poem. I came into the world without being asked, and when the time for dying comes, I shall not be consulted. But between the boundaries of birth and death lies the dominion of choice, to be a doer or a dreamer, to be a lifter or a leaner, to speak out or remain silent, to extend a hand in friendship or to look the other way, to feel the suffering of others or to be callous and insensitive. These are the choices. It is in the choosing that my measure as a person is determined.
Many of you may know the words of the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, and so on. I'm going to chant them now in Hebrew, and then I'll share them in English as well. Mizmor David, Adonai Rohi Echsa, B'Tashem B'Tzei, Amei Menuchot Yanani. Nafshi Shover, Nafshi Shover, Yam Chaim B'Mad Letzedek L'Mad Shemo. Gam Kien Vegetzam Avet Lo Kiatayim Adi Shi Techa Mishantecha Shivtecha Umishantecha Hemayelachamoni Ta'ar Levanai Shulchan Taras Lefanai Shulchan Taras Lefanai Shulchan Neged Dishanta Lashem Enoshi Dishanta Lashem Enoshi Dishanta Lashem Enoshi Kosire Ach tov v'chesed yirdefu kol yemei chaya Shakti, Shakti bevet Adonai, Veshakti bevet Adonai, Leon Yami, Yalala, you can sing with me. A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Amen. So in a moment, I'll ask you to rise for a prayer known as El Male Rachamim. And again, I'll chant this in Hebrew and then translate into English. This is a prayer that has been accompanying the Jewish people in this moment over many, many generations. And you'll hear in the midst of the prayer that I'll be naming Sid by his Hebrew name, Shmuelev ben Moshe Chaim Vegela, which is his name and also the names of his parents. So if you're able to at this time, please rise. El Male Rachamim Shochem B'Meromi Anseh Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina B'malot Kedoshim U'Teorim Kazor Mazirim Et Nishmat Shmuelev ben Moshe Chaim Vegela Shalach Leolamo Began Eden Tehe Menuchato Ana B'Chanim Astirem Besetek Nafecha Leolamim Utzro B'Tzra Chaim Et Nishmato Adonai Salato Ve'anuach B'Shalom Nishkavo V'Nomo Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Shmuelev ben Moshe Chaim Vegela, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bonds of life. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. You may be seated. So it's customary to say a prayer known as the Mourner's Kaddish after the burial. We're going to also say it here because some of you will be here but not able to come all the way to the burial later. The Kaddish is one of those prayers in Jewish tradition which has a paradox connected to it. It's an obligation for the close mourners to say this prayer. And depending on your connection to the person who passed away, you may be saying this prayer for 30 days, you may be saying it for 11 months. However, you're not supposed to say it when you're alone. it's a prayer that's said in the presence of a minyan, a quorum of 10 or more, a community. And when I think about what that means in practice, it seems to me that this is one of those treasures from our ancestors that ensures when people are on the path of mourning, they are not alone. They have an obligation to say this prayer and to find the community, and the community has an obligation to assemble and be present and accompany those who are grieving. And so it's so important that all of you who are here today are here. And I know that this moment of showing up is a moment. And I know just from what little I know of those of you in the room, that today is just the beginning of that showing up. And I really trust and hope that in the weeks to come, in the months to come, that this community of friends and family will continue to show up for those who are remembering Sid today, and to ask and to bring food and to do all the things we do to show each other that we're here for each other. So I'd like to call upon the close family to rise for Kaddish, and anyone else in the room who is saying Kaddish for other loved ones, you can rise as well at this time, if you're able. And you'll see about halfway through this prayer, there's a line. I'll give you a little signal and invite everyone in the room to rise for the second part of the prayer, if you're able to do that. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav Yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. You may be seated. So in a few moments, we'll have a closing song, and then because Sidney was a lieutenant colonel, he'll be receiving full military honors. And I'll call that team forward in a moment. You can remain seated here. We'll have a ceremony here with the flag, and then you'll hear a gun salute, which is part of the full honors that he'll be receiving today. So a few other things to note. First of all, if you'd like to make a donation in honor of Sidney Eisenbaum, you can do so to B'nai Havara, which is the community where I'm the rabbi, and Pam and Mark are a part of that community. If you would like to visit with the family, the best time to do that is to come to what's known as Shiva, which is a custom of gathering community in the home. The family is going to be receiving visitors at Pam and Mark's home between 5 and 8. We'll have a service at 7, which will be a very brief evening service with a chance for people to really share their memories together. And Shiva will continue tomorrow between 11 and 2 and 5 and 8 to just come by and visit, with another 7 o'clock service tomorrow evening. Because we have to get the family to the cemetery relatively quickly after this service, it's not going to be a great opportunity to greet and visit with the family right immediately after this. The family will be heading into that room and on. So please do come to Shiva if you're able to do that. And with that, I think I'd like to call forward our military honor team. Please rise. Oh, sorry, one more moment. I'm so sorry. First, a closing song. First, a closing song from Hal, and then we'll call our military team. Oh, jump in. Teach us to treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day, each day. Teach us to treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day. Now I'd like to invite you to please rise if you're able as we welcome our military honor team.
Ready, step. Ready, step. Ready, hold. Ready, hold.
Okay, we're now gonna bring the casket to the back of the chapel for the military pallbearers, placing it in the coach. If the honorary pallbearers would be kind enough to follow us.
Thank you again, everyone, for coming, and hope to see you at Shiva.